I know we can only pick 5 movies, but I really wish we could have done a top 10 of the 2010s. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainly Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 horror movies of the 2010s. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. Well, it's the first Saturday of the month, so that means it's time for another episode of the Movie Nerds Club. Since it's October, we decided to go with a horror theme this month and chose to focus in on the past decade. So after you watch my top horror picks of the 2010s, make sure you check out the videos from the other members of the Movie Nerds Club: Elsie Screen Talk, Rachel's Reviews, Ren Geekness, Ryan Cam, and Zach Pope. Links to their videos are in the description below. So before we jump into the ranking, I want to once again mention how hard it was to narrow this category down to only 5 movies, and then rank them. I thought our first episode was tough last month, but at least we were limited to only the 58 films that currently make up Disney's animated feature film catalog. This month is wide open when it comes to possibilities, an entire decade of one of my favorite genres. So it was a painful process cutting movies from the top 5 team, and even more painful ranking them. Remember, these are just my top movies, not the top movies, so be sure to post your own personal top 5 horror movies of the 2010s in the comments below. I've already reviewed some of these movies on this channel, so if you want to check those out for some more in-depth thoughts on each of them, I'll put links in the description below, and also link them up in the cards as we go along. Alright, let's get this top list started. Coming in at number 5, Hereditary. As many of you know, I have a bit of a complicated relationship with A24 films, especially their horror output. They always sound interesting, but I find myself struggling to get invested in the stories more often than not. There are a few exceptions though, and a couple A24 horror movies that I really love, Ari Aster's directorial debut being one of them. This is a movie that I like more every time I watch it, and I really liked it when I first saw it in the theater. This is a wicked dark film, so it's probably a little weird to say I like it and that I enjoy watching it, but I do. It's tough at points with some of the visceral, grief-fueled family drama, but this is just such a fantastic film. The characters are incredibly real-feeling, and Toni Collette's performance here was superb, and I think she deserved a lot more recognition than she got for it. It's an emotionally draining story for sure, but it's so interesting and compelling, and I love how it all comes together. The film starts as one thing and ends as something totally different, but it's such a wild and gripping ride. Coming in at number 4, Annihilation. I actually went back and forth about even including this one. Not because I don't think it deserves to be in a top 5, but rather because I wasn't sure if I'd really classify it as horror. I've always viewed it as more of a sci-fi film, but the longer I thought about it, the more it seemed to fit in the horror realm. The overall tone is very tense and unsettling. There's some pretty gruesome body horror throughout, and then there are a number of moments that are genuinely intense and creepy, bordering on scary. So yeah, I feel pretty good about classifying this, at least partly, as horror. This is definitely a weird movie, and with that weirdness, it's a film that I could have been just as easily frustrated by, but I find it utterly fascinating. I think a big part of that comes from the biology basis of the science fiction. I am a biologist, and so the biological concepts and ideas in this are just so cool to me. I mean, they're obviously fiction, but most of them do have a genuine basis in real science. When I saw this in the theater, I went with a friend of mine from grad school, another biologist, and we talked about this movie for like 5 straight hours after we got out. And that's just part of the story. I mean, you've got the amazing cinematography, the score, the tension, the all-female scientist set of characters, just a great movie that always makes me think. Coming in at number 3, It Chapter 1. So I'm sure this one's not really much of a surprise to anyone, because you guys all know I'm a huge Stephen King fan. In fact, we're right in the midst of a series of Stephen King reviews with this year's edition of 13 Nights of Halloween. But as much as I love King's stories, the film adaptations haven't always been the best. So when this movie came out, it was like some sort of revelation. Not only was it a good adaptation of the kid half of the book, but it was also really excellent as a movie and miles better than the 1990 miniseries. This is one of those perfect, enjoyable horror movies. With the great cast of kids and the frequently comedic and adventurous tone, it's got a fun Goonies vibe to it. But then it's got the horror elements. It's not a super scary movie, but it's definitely got some creepy images and some Pennywise moments that'll at least get your adrenaline going a bit. And so, it's one of those fun horror movies. And this movie gets a whole extra level of excitement for me because I live in Maine. And not just anywhere in Maine, but just outside of Derry. Well, Bangor, but it's the city that Derry's based on. And so I saw this movie in, essentially, a Derry theater. Coming in at number 2, Us. Now, I know what you're thinking. Us makes the cut, but Get Out doesn't? I love both of Jordan Peele's movies, and if this was a top 10 list, Get Out definitely would have been on it. But there's just something about Us that connected with me on a stronger level. I mean, I liked this movie so much that I actually saw it twice in the theater, which I only ever do on very rare occasion. Much like a few of the other films on this list, this was a movie that I couldn't stop thinking about. The way everything unfolds and how it all comes together by the end was so satisfying to me. Of Peele's 2 films, this one feels more like a traditional horror movie. Get Out was awesome with its psychological thriller elements, but Us morphs from one horror style to the next as the film progresses. It's got a psychological horror side to it at first, but that horror quickly becomes tangible as we work our way through home invasion horror and then straight up slasher as our characters are stalked. Just like with Get Out, this movie's about more than just the scares, and the social themes at the center of the story are compellingly wrapped in. In fact, duality is built right into the red jumpsuit fabric of the story, and along with some great performances, one of my favorite scores, and some visually striking cinematography, this is one movie that'll always stand out from the crowd for me. So that means my number 1 horror movie of the 2010s is The Conjuring. There's no doubt that this past decade was a really good one for horror. I mean, there have always been some good horror movies, basically every year, but the 2010s saw a revitalization and resurgence of the genre, and The Conjuring might just be the most well-crafted of them all. I reviewed the entire Conjuring universe not too long ago, and one of the most omnipresent things about it was the excellent cinematography. I gush about it in just about every one of those videos, but the first Conjuring film is easily the most impressive in that regard. To be honest, it's the most impressive in every regard. The story itself is a fairly standard haunting/possession tale, but it's the way that it's told that sets it apart. We have a set of characters that we actually care about, a believable, relatable family that we want to see survive their ordeal. And then of course we've got the paranormal investigator duo of Ed and Lorraine Warren, played equally as believably by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. I really love the period piece element to this movie too, with some great time-appropriate music and production design. And we can't forget about the actual horror. This is a creepy, unsettling movie. It's paced so well, and the tension builds wonderfully throughout, finally letting loose in the wild and scary finale. Alright, so there you have it, my top 5 horror movies of the 2010s. What are your top 2010s horror films? Be sure to post your own ranking in the comments below, and don't forget to check out the pics of the other members of the Movie Nerds Club. Remember, I've already reviewed some of these movies, so you can check those videos out for some more in-depth discussion of each, as well as my ratings, pros and cons, and even tailored film recommendations. Also, if you're interested in buying any of these movies, I do have affiliate links to all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this top list, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe or add it to see more videos like this, as well as movie reviews. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.